Madam Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, uh, Dr. Vijay Chandru, Professor Sharat Chandra, Professor Yatindra, Dr. Gayatri Sabawal, all the dignitaries present here and invitees and the startups. I'm so happy to be here. I congratulate each one of you for being here and being a part of intrinsic ecosystem that we have. Uh, we have all benefited from all of you, from the biotechnology sector and the life sciences sector. And it is because of all of you that Karnataka and Bangalore is whatever it is known for. Karnataka has played an important role in making biotechnology as a major industry within the country. Uh, we were the first ones to list out biotechnology as a separate department to focus on biotechnology sector. Under the able guidance of Vision Group on Biotechnology, led by Kiran and also my predecessors over the years, we were the first ones to release a biotech specific policy at the turn of the century, which got revised in 2011 to ensure that the state keeps up with the rapid developments. Now we are looking at biotechnology policy version 3 in the very near future. We are working with ABLE and we are also proactively engaged with Department of Biotechnology in Government of India. And growth of industry in the state is a fruitful outcome of the industry, the government of India, and all the entrepreneurs coming together. So Karnataka has emerged as one of the largest biotechnology hubs in India. This is because of this active collaboration, as I mentioned. The Institute of Bioinformatics and Applied Biotechnology that has started here along with the Center for Human Genetics, the Bangalore Bioinnovation Center, and the Bio-IT Center, which is now getting metamorphosed into Center for Genome Sequencing. So these all institutions have been set up in the past decade on the back of this strong partnership between the industry and the government, with significant grants from Government of Karnataka and wholehearted participation from the industry and the academia. Thriving on these factors, Bangalore ranks as one of the best places for innovative biotech startups. Not only biotechnology, but also in all other sectors also, Karnataka and Bangalore provide a unique ecosystem which is unparalleled so far. In biotech, we have more than 400 biotech startups in the city and its vicinity. Karnataka has been a pioneer since very, very long to have developed a policy framework which actively supports the growth of different sectors. To encourage startups and innovative ideas, the major factor include availability of infrastructure, incubation, co-working and ready-to-use spaces, availability of skills and talent, access to and ease of funding, access of mentors, and above all, active participation from the government to regulate and monitor the sector. I would like to especially mention that government has already recognized many of these needs and we are working on them in a very systematic manner. Karnataka has been a pioneer in providing startups with incubation spaces. We have partnered with NASSCOM to launch the startup warehouse in 2013. We have forged ahead with multiple incubation facilities in partnership with the industry associations like Internet and Mobile Association of India, IAMI, for Mobile 10X facility. To further strengthen the system, the state government has also established incubation facilities at colleges and institutions across the state under the New Age Incubation Network and Technology Business Incubator initiatives. Now these incubators being set up under these networks, NAIN and TBIs have already led to several patents and 70 odd prototypes. An outstanding example of these efforts is the place we have assembled today, the Bangalore Biohelix, which houses the institutional area, the innovation area and biomanufacturing area, is the the shining example of what all we intend to do and what we have been working at. The Bangalore Bioinnovation Center, which was established recently, has in just under a year incubated 21 biotech startups, out of which 4 have graduated. Collectively, these startups have generated 20 patents, attracted 30 crores worth of funding, and a couple of them have also uh, brought out products which are available in the market. BBC is also in the process of setting up a first of its kind medtech as accelerator in the country with BIREC funding. It is also working towards a hub and spoke model of incubators across the state by hand-holding such facilities. We are also in the process of creating a high-quality mentor pool for the startups, which I am sure with the support of the industry and the academia will lead to multiple leapfrogging in terms of how this idea can reach out to the startup ecosystem. Skilling is a very important thrust area for the state. To bridge the gap between education and training provided by academic institutions and skill sets, the state has initiated many measures like biotechnology finishing schools. The BTFS and now the new version, the BICEP program, is promoted by the state to provide required skill sets and practical experience through internship with industry to postgraduates with biotechnology specialization. The curriculum and mentorship of these finishing schools have been developed in association with the Vision Group and ABLE, the Association for Biotech-Led Enterprises. In 5 batches of this program, 828 students have been enrolled, and the placement record is about 70%. To address the issue of access of funds, the government is promoting innovation through grants and also funding support like idea to proof of concept. The Department of IT, Biotechnology funds up to rupees 50 lakhs for an innovator who is looking for funds for proof of concept validation, certification and cover cost in manufacturing of pilot devices. I'm happy to mention that out of 40 odd startups supported through the idea to POC funds, 26 of them are biotech startups. Alongside, the government is also working on enabling the biotech venture fund and also a fund of funds to support the entire startup ecosystem. In all these activities, we are working with the industry, and a biotech facilitation cell has been set up within the department. This is also being replicated in terms of startup facilitation cell, which has again come up very recently, with a dedicated relationship manager, a helpline, and a portal for dedicated access. The cell is a one-stop solution for all the information and the procedural aspects of startups. We are connecting to through the startup portal, you can connect to the government departments, industry and academia, and providing a common platform to entrepreneurs. Over the last 50 years, Bangalore has been a melting pot where industry has worked very closely with state government. And we believe that with all these initiatives undertaken, the state would be very well positioned to lead from the front and to retain its edge as the biotech hub of India. I once again welcome all the dignitaries present here. Dr. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw of Biochem, who chairs and the Vision Group on biotech industry. Professor Vijay Chandru from Indian Institute of Science. Professor Padmanabhan has to join us, and Professor Sharat Chandra. This event would not have been possible without the active support of Dr. Gayatri Sabharwal and Professor Yatindra. I thank you all. I also extend a very warm welcome to all the participants and speakers, and feel and believe that the Startup Bio would become a pivotal event in the biotech sector of the country, attracting top startups and innovators to Bangalore. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Gupta, for encapsulating the very large number of activities of the department so crisply. I'm sure they're very encouraging to our startups that need all the help they can get. So before Professor Chandru speaks, we'll just do some rearrangement of the chairs. That's okay, Harshit. Okay. I now request Professor Vijay Chandru to speak on the potential of entrepreneurship in genomics and personalized medicine.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Gayatri, Professor Yatindra, Kiran, Ms. Gaura Gupta, and Professor Sharachandra. Uh, and welcome to, I guess, all the participants. Uh, so, entrepreneurial opportunities in genomics and precision medicine. And I'm sorry that I actually prepared slides because I think it's required some rearrangement, but hopefully you'll enjoy them. I do want to mention that I'm also associated with the Vision Group of Biotechnology. I also serve on the Vision Group of Science and Technology and the Karnataka State Council for Science and Technology. So very embedded in some sense with the Karnataka innovation system. I wanted to start off by actually acknowledging that the Indian Institute of Science itself is probably one of the great beneficiaries of state support, right? Of course, the state in 1909 was the Maharaja, right? And the fact that he gave 420 acres of land and cash because Tatas didn't have enough money to put up the tower, and the support needed to get the Indian Institute of Science going, I think is something that we all actually should think is the early involvement of the state government in the enterprise of all science and technology and biotechnology as well, right? And in fact, this quote of the Maharaja, Krishna Rajendra, who was only, I guess, 26 or 27 years old then, when the institute started, was Mysore will, I feel, sure reap a reward for the liberality of Her Highness the Maharani Regent's government. He was not yet the Maharaja. By having at her doors a university which will teach her sons to increase the material wealth of their country. So in some sense, the Indian Institute of Science charter is to contribute to the material wealth of Mysore, right, and to the country. So it was not surprising then that the first example of I would say sanctioned faculty entrepreneurship in the country came from the Indian Institute of Science. And in fact, Strand is that example. So in 2000, in October, we started Strand, and the Indian Institute of Science is actually a promoter of the company and still remains a substantial shareholder. And the Institute, as most of you know, is over 100 years now. Started in 1909. And so let me go on to the real topic, which is genomics. Genomics, to me, is the perfect storm of information technology, biotechnology, and nanotechnology. All three sectors which are a great focus in this state, right? And so, in many ways, I've tried to map out the timeline of both the development of genomics on the one hand and the development of information technology on the same timeline. And it's quite amazing how, they have sort of proceeded along pretty much the late 40s till today in parallel, with a lot of very interesting crossovers. And nanotech has, of course, come into being as applied chemistry and solid state chemistry in a very substantial way. And today, if we talk about genome sequencing at large scale, at factory scale, and so on, it's the combination of all of these technologies that is making it possible, right? As has been mentioned a couple of times, I think in many ways, Karnataka is in a position to play a leadership role in genomics. I think Bangalore is already, I would say, India's dominant genomic cluster. Today, if you actually look at the number of genomes sequenced, Bangalore probably accounts for 2/3 of India, right? And between the academic institutions, ISC, NCBS, JNC, IBAB, and IIIT Bangalore, you have actually, the academic support, and then you have companies like Strand, MedGenome, Genotypic, and now Syngene is also sequencing. So we have actually, a phenomenal sort of resource here, resource base that's already in a great position. Uh, I have actually already made an appeal, but I'll make it now to the audience as well. I think this state really deserves a factory scale sequencing center. I think Strand and IBAB collaborated in creating Ganit Labs here, which sort of was the capacity building phase, and that was 6 years ago. So I think it's time now to think about something much bigger and grander, which will again continue to keep this state at a leading sort of position in the whole field of genomics. And I've suggested that NCBS, Strand, and IBAB come together on this. So the second suggestion I have, since we have Principal Secretary here, is that, really in Bangalore we have twin cities of biotechnology. And in the North Cluster, we have the Science City, which is, and in the South Cluster, we have the Translational City, right? So we have industry here, we have IBAB, CHG, and so on here. And in the north, we have the Indian Institute of Science, JNC, NCBS. And, it's a little bit of a drive getting from there to here, as Gayatri will attest to. She does it every day. But I think, we shouldn't be moving atoms, we should be moving electrons, right? And so my appeal is that let's just create an incredible, fiber optic connectivity between the north and the south, so that we can interact on a daily or hour by hour basis through electronic media, because I think these days that is really, a substantive way of interacting. My third appeal is that since we are located here right next to the Center for Human Genetics, that we actually focus in this state on continuing to show leadership in the whole topic of rare diseases, right? The Center for Human Genetics is already the center of excellence for this kind of work, but we also have the Indira Gandhi Institute for Child Health. We have also in Karnataka, we have the Kasturba Medical Center in Manipal. We have the St. John's Hospital, so many other institutions that can contribute to creating these centers of excellence. The Vision Group for Biotechnology has already drafted the first rare disease policy for the country. This is for the state of Karnataka, and it is right now in the Secretariat going through finishing touches. I think there are opportunities to build on the Karnataka programs in newborn screening and to take it one level higher to actually screen for all the genomic information that would help as per the ACMG guidelines. That's about 50 odd genes. I think we could essentially have an initiative in that direction. Clearly in hemoglobinopathies and bleeding disorders, again, we have a large burden in the state, and again, there are things that we could be doing there with genomics to address these. There's an opportunity to actually now start carrier screening in this state, because I think if we don't do that, we'll end up in trouble, as I will show you, at least in the example of thalassemia. And gene therapies, of course, we have the stem cell centers at NCBS, which collaborate with CMC Vellore and Vellore is actually going to probably launch the first gene therapy trials later this year for hemophilia. So, things are going well. We could continue to build on this area of strength in this sector. This is just an infographic about thalassemia, and my question there upon right is, will Karnataka and India become like Iran, Iraq, Qatar, Maldives, and Mauritius, where 100% of the population are carriers? Now, the only way to avoid these things is to take proactive steps today. And this is why I was talking about carrier screening and so on, so that we can have counseling to young couples as they plan their families on the risks of bringing in children into the world with these disorders, right? And it is believed that Karnataka has somewhere on the order of 10,000 thalassemics with thalassemia major, and just the burden on them is about 1,000 crores a year. And how do we address this as a community, right? Now let's get back to genomics, and why are we all so excited about genomics, and why is Karnataka sort of, building this whole competence? And the point is that there has never been a technology law that has moved as fast as genomics has. Genomics, since 2007, since the advent of next-gen sequencing, has actually moved at the square of Moore's law. So that much faster than Moore's law. So you can imagine if the impact of electronics and getting supercomputers into your phones has been the impact of Moore's law, what the impact of Flatley's law is going to be, right? And these have entered what you might call the second half of the chessboard. That is, you remember the old story about one grain on the first square, double it, double it, double it, and so on. Once you get to half of the chessboard, you've doubled 4 billion times, right? Now, both electronics and genomics have entered the second half of the chessboard, which means that they have doubled, or the cost has halved 2 to the 32 times, right? So that's the power of exponential laws, and that's why genomics is so central to what we do, right? And of course, everybody here knows about what the genome is about. It's actually not just 2 pages, but if you stack the human genome, it's several stories high, right? So it's a huge set of volumes of books, but in a 4-letter code. Now, the challenge is that when you sequence, you're going to get a hell of a lot of information, right? This is a big data problem that is, in some sense, the biggest of the big data problems. And so what you need is something smart that can help you sort through this and figure out what is actually causing the disease, what are the therapies that would match with the disease, and so on. And this is where we've been able at Strand to bring information technology, artificial intelligence, and genomics together, and life sciences together to build a platform that can do just that. So I don't know if there's volume, but this is the story of a patient called Meena Nandal, and if you go to YouTube, you can actually see, so you're going to start it? Okay. Turn up the volume.
2011, my stomach lower side, I felt some little pain. Then I told my husband that there is some problem, little problem. And that time I used to go to my school and enjoying life in between. So he told me, why don't you go to gynecologist and take some test. I told my husband, I sent the report to him. Then he consulted with a doctor. Then she told that it's a cancer and it's 3rd stage, ovary cancer. You should consult doctor first.
We never believed this thing can happen. I felt if she goes, how I would feel. The life without her is difficult to imagine. But human nature is this. Once you are deep into the problem, after the shock, you start recovering and finding solutions. I discussed this with Dr. Amit Agarwal that I am very skeptical about chemo. Is there something else? Because we had a relative, he says targeted therapy may be better. Then he says maybe we can get her tested genetically. There is a company in Bangalore, Strand Life Sciences. They have developed the tools to test the BRCA gene.
In Meena's case, she had come to us for undergoing genomic testing for the BRCA gene. The BRCA gene, or the breast cancer gene, has been known to be associated with breast cancer for a very long time. When we completed the analysis, we had found a variant that was not commonly associated with the breast cancer gene. Most laboratories would have probably allowed that matter to be at the end of it. What we did was we asked for that specific variant to be studied in her extended family. When we looked at the extended family, we found that variant in a few family members. And this allowed us to come up with a proposal to the doctor or to the treating oncologist saying, we believe that this requires a certain sort of intervention. Fortunately, the patient was put on a drug that was very relevant for this sort of treatment, and she's responded wonderful.
Simultaneously, chemo was taking place also. On chemo, I asked doctor that we go for first line, let's see. In the second chemo, the cancer has gone out. It's absolute resolution of the problem. It's 9 months, he is fine, and a great thing is there is no side effect. After chemo, you are debilitated completely. It was amazing, the fight.
So Meena Nandal actually ran in the Pinkathon here in Bangalore. So she is doing well. So thank you. Yeah, this is the reason we all do this, right? To actually have this impact. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I've called Meena Nandal the zebra because, you know, in some sense, the variant that we found in the BRCA2 gene is a missense variant. And many physicians would have just let it go, right? But the fact that we actually went after and sequenced the extended family, and as you can see, the same variant shows up in her brother and sister. And this kind of established that maybe this was the driver mutation and allowed the physician and gave the physician the confidence to go forward with a targeted therapy. Now, these are the kinds of stories in precision medicine that are becoming more and more common. And what is happening is that precision medicine is really moving evidence-based medicine to the next level, right? And the easy way to think about this is that physicians are always trained to think about when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. The challenge is now they have to think about zebras as well, right? And so there is, you know, Karnataka can again lead the way in educating the physicians that now there are new tools and new ways of looking at patients and treating them. So let me end there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chandru, for that interesting story and in general the very forward-looking comments. I now request Kiran to talk on the biosector in India today and tomorrow. There's no better person to talk than Kiran.
Shri Gaurav Gupta, Professor Sharat Chandra, Vijay Chandru, Professor Yatindra, Gayatri Sabharwal, ladies and gentlemen. I stand here before you as a very proud founder of India's first biotech startup, right here in the city of Bangalore. And I can tell you that being an intrinsic part of this evolving biotech sector in India over the last 4 decades, I'm extremely optimistic and encouraged with what I see today. I just want to spend this time that I'm sharing with all of you to really dwell upon what has happened in the biotech sector, both within the country and in Karnataka as a state. And let's assess what we have done right, what we have not done quite so well, and what we need to do to really leverage all that we have done so far. So when I look upon what we have achieved over the last 4 decades, I'm astonished at some of the great things we have achieved in a very under-resourced way, in a very frugal way over these 4 decades. I can tell you that compared to most other biotech nations who have had huge investment and huge resource commitment, we have invested and provided very, very suboptimal resources. And yet, I think what we have achieved is astonishing. Today, India brags of being the world's biggest producer of vaccines. Today, certainly, we are one of the largest producers of insulins and amongst the large developing hubs for biologics in the world. We are today a $35 billion biotech or a sector in the sense of creating a $35 billion bioeconomy. What do I mean by this? Well, I think we have a bioeconomy in agri-biotech, in pharmaceutical and healthcare biotech, in environmental biotech, and in industrial biotechnology. This is what we have accomplished over the years. We aspire to become a $100 billion bioeconomy by 2025. And today we are challenging ourselves even further by saying that the next $100 billion should not take more than 5 years, which means that by 2030, we want to be a $200 billion bioeconomy. Now you might say that it's a bit of a blue skies thinking, it's a bit of an imaginative thinking, but I for one firmly believe that we can do it. Why? Because of all that we have created thus far. But it will only become an aspiration and a dream if we don't do what is required to get us there. Now, when I look at what the government of India has done very well in terms of the biotech sector, I certainly believe that it has invested in capacity building in terms of creating all the biotech research institutions. I think it has done extremely well in creating BIRAC, BIPP, and many other such institutions that really enable innovation and ideas to get to the market. This has been transformational, I might add, in the last 5 years. But all this has happened only in the last 5 years. What we haven't done well at the center is the fact that we haven't created enough excitement and interest in capital markets to invest in this sector to get it to the next level. What we haven't done that well is to really provide the opportunity to build scale in many of these very, very interesting opportunities that we have created in the country. Now let me get to the state of Karnataka, because I really believe the state of Karnataka has actually excelled in investing in this sector, unlike any other state government in the country. Karnataka probably has invested the maximum, even greater than the Department of Biotechnology in the translational space. If you think about it, this was the first state that came out with a vision group for biotechnology in a very, very unique format, which brought industry, academia, and the government working in unison to come up with policies and plans that could be implemented in a very, very time bound way. And that is why Karnataka is the undisputed leader in biotechnology, because we were all aligned on what we needed to do in the space of biotechnology to really create an exciting and vibrant biocluster. And therefore, what you see today is the thinking behind creating this biocluster in Karnataka. What has really worked well is the vision that this group had to create centers like this, IBAB, Center for Human Genetics, and above all, this whole concept of making sure that there was an incubator concept as given as a mandate to many of these institutions. What has also worked very well in Karnataka is the fact that the state government was not shy to invest in creating these centers, was not shy to come up with investment schemes for biotech companies. And you just heard today from Gaurav Gupta that this state has come out with a funding for proof of concept funding, where the government is willing to actually invest 50 lakhs per startup to take their ideas to the next level. Now, I think this is a very, very far-sighted policy, which is actually, something that BIRAC has been doing in the recent past, but I can tell you this is also going to be a very important part of driving growth and building that scale that we're talking about. And just now you heard a plea from Vijay Chandru saying we need to build a factory-scale gene sequencing center, which the state government, I'm sure, will readily support. What is also important is that any new concept that is coming out from the DBT, when they look around to see where has somebody actually invested and created some semblance of critical mass or capacity or capability building, fingers point to the state of Karnataka. For instance, most recently the Department of Biotechnology has agreed to support an institute for synthetic biology. Why? Because the state government is also willing to actually come forward and co-fund such an institute. The same thing I'm sure will happen to the Institute of Gene Sequencing, because this is what is required. You need proactive state funding and state investment, and it's not just about throwing money. It's about making sure that you have what it takes to build such institutes. There's no point in setting up a gene sequencing facility in a state that does not have the capabilities of running such an institute. And therefore, we need to make sure that all that has been invested thus far, and certainly I think Karnataka has been stellar in investing in this sector, because I think what has happened, I must remind you, let's look at some of the most successful bioclusters in the world. It started with the Bay Area, where the sheer presence of Genentech and Stanford and that academic cluster actually created the world's first, most visible and notable biocluster in the world. But this cluster quickly lost leadership to the Boston biocluster. And why did this happen? Because the Bay Area biocluster lost a lot of its advantage because the focus became on IT and the tech sector. And that's where the Bay Area focus was, that's where the Bay Area investments went, that's where all the resource creation and resource commitment went into. It became a huge, huge sector in the tech sector, the IT sector. And that's where I think I commend the government of Massachusetts and the city of Boston because they are the ones who said, let's create a life science cluster in the Boston area because I think we can quickly overtake the Bay Area who's beginning to shift focus on the tech sector. And this is exactly what happened. Today, the undisputed bio cluster of the world is the Boston bio cluster. And again, what is it that made it possible? It was the ideal ecosystem coming together of academic research institutions like MIT, Broad Institute, Whitehead Institute, and of course, the industries. I guess there is some protest going on about biotech. Or what is it? These are uninformed, uneducated young people who don't even understand science. That is what is happening in our country. That today we have biotechnology which has been hijacked by groups of people who have no respect for science or the knowledge it creates. Anyway, let's carry on and let's forget about the noises outside. Now, when you look at what we have done so far, in the startup ecosystem. The startup ecosystem in India, in Bangalore, is very exciting. Over the last 6 years, there have been 3,000 biotech startups, 1,000 biotech startups in the country. 3,000 founders and co-founders. And of these, 30% have actually been women entrepreneurs. I think that is an extremely, extremely proud moment for us. What is even more significant is that $2.5 billion have actually been invested in these startups. Now today, I think, Bangalore and India is becoming very important because we have wonderful opportunities, whether it is in medtech, whether it is in genomics, whether it is in biosimilars, which is going to be a $240 billion opportunity for India and Indian companies by 2030. I think this is a very exciting area. We already have a company like Biocon leading the way in terms of biosimilars, but I'm looking forward to many more companies like ours playing in this particular sector. I'm already seeing a lot of smaller companies actually coming up with ancillary services for developing biosimilars. But I think it is only a matter of time before before other companies can scale up and become large biosimilar based companies. I think genomics is a huge opportunity. And like you just heard, precision medicine and predictive medicine and personalized medicines are going to be very, very important for the world. And I think if Bangalore and Karnataka could lead the way in this particular opportunity, which is again going to be a huge opportunity in the next 20 years, it is forecast that this sector alone can actually become a $100 billion sector. And India must try and stake a claim in this sector. Similarly, I believe that vaccines are also becoming a very important hallmark for India and Indian companies. I am so proud that, between Serum Institute and Shanta and Bharat Biotech and Biological E, they are actually counted as amongst the world's biggest producers of vaccines. And what is even more important is that Bharat Biotech has now focused on bringing out a Zika vaccine. It has brought out a dengue vaccine and of course the rotavirus vaccine. I think all these are very, very important opportunities and statements that we are making to the world saying we have those capabilities. And if there's one big differentiator and difference between the IT sector and the biotech sector is the fact that the biotech sector has engaged very closely with academia. The academic research institutions have been a very integral part of the biotech ecosystem. Whereas in the IT sector, it has basically been about capacity building, and now they're feeling the pinch of not having engaged enough with the very important computer science research institutions like IISc and others, which actually could have helped them to innovate much faster. So I think intrinsically, the biotech sector has a huge opportunity to actually innovate much faster. And I think this is what is the opportunity that we are actually going to be looking at over today and tomorrow. And I think what is happening is that we are looking at innovative startups who are doing some incredible stuff. We are seeing some incredible innovative ideas because as a country, we have grand challenges. I think we have grand challenges in terms of providing food security through agri-biotech. We have grand challenges in terms of energy independence, which it can do through bioenergy. We have grand challenges in health security, which we need to do through a number of approaches, starting with diagnostics, starting with vaccines, and of course the biologics and other small molecule opportunities that we need to look at based on research. Because there are a number of opportunities using modern science, modern technologies, and modern knowledge to actually address a large number of unmet needs for a country like India. Rare diseases is a huge opportunity for a country like India. Because of our sheer population, we have a huge, challenge and a burden of rare diseases. And a center like the Center for Human Genetics has done pioneering work in bringing to the fore a lot of knowledge and research findings in the orphan disease area, but we now need to take it to the next level. We need to develop drugs, we need to develop diagnostics, and we have it in us to do all this. If there were two stumbling blocks in our journey, it has been about clinical trials and voices that you hear outside, which is about stopping, the genetically enhanced crops. I think when you look at what BT cotton has done to our country, from making it a net exporter of cotton from being a net importer of cotton, and when you look at what genetically enhanced crops can do for a country like ours in terms of drought resistance, in terms of the kind of saline soils that we are dealing with, in kinds of the soils that have been depleted because of overuse of fertilizers and so on and so forth, I think there's a lot to be done. And now with CRISPR-Cas9 technologies, I think we can do a lot in the area of both agri-biotech and in, of course, human biotech. I think when you look at gene therapies, stem cell therapies, we've started, and I think we need to build on this. And therefore, I go back to our aspiration. Biotech is a transformational sector. IT transformed our lives, digitized our lives, and really brought in a huge amount of leapfrogging opportunities for India. But so can biotech. I think biotech is going to transform our lives in ways that you can't imagine. As a country, we need affordable access to a lot of biotechnologies. And I think you are going to listen to some of these very exciting talks over the course of the next 2 days. And I think that's where we need to steer our attention to. What are the opportunities? What are the exciting grand challenges that we must address? And how do we build this $200 billion bioeconomy for India by 2030? All this can happen only if we have the central government and the state governments looking at how to invest in this wonderful sector that can transform India. And I think that's what I'm very excited about as being a part of this ecosystem. I think this is what I'm very proud of in terms of what IBAB, BBC, and CAG are all doing in this particular biocluster. And I have no doubts about it, that as we create more evidence that this is the technology that will help this country, I'm sure you will see less of these kind of activist voices raising their ignorant voices protesting against the miracle powers of such technologies. Thank you very much.
Kiran is always marvelous to listen to, and I'm glad that a lot of young people have gotten to hear her. Thank you, Kiran, for that beautiful and comprehensive analysis. May I request Professor Sharat Chandra to address the gathering.
Dr. Kiran Majumdar Shah, Mr. Gaurav Gupta, Vijay Chandru, Gayatri Sabarwal, and others here. Professor GP has just come in, Professor Padmanabhan. I am from CHG, the lab next door, which I hope some of you will visit. My interests are in human genetics, the role genes play in life processes in health and disease. Because this is a startup function, I wish to draw attention to possible startup opportunities in the genetics and rare disease sector on the basis of our experience during the past several years in CHG. During the past 3.5 years, we have seen about 19,000 families with one or more children with genetic disorders. And what we do when we see a patient is we begin with the diagnosis, then the management, advise the parents, counseling, and in a small number of cases, treatment where treatment options are available. A majority of the 19,000 cases that we have seen are from BPL families, which means cost is a major concern at every step of the way. And that's one of the things that startups which enter this area have to constantly keep in mind. Low cost diagnosis, low cost management of the disease, low cost therapies, and so on. We just can't import the Western model and hope it works here because it will only benefit a very small number of patients, as I will show you a little later. Now, the moment you give a diagnosis to a child or a parent, question is, then what? It's not a, what use is giving a label to a disease to a parent who has come from Raichur or Bellary or some far off place. The couple come here with one child and they have this, encountered this problem and lived with this problem for several years. Most often, the parent wants to know, is there some way of treating the disease? Can I cure this child, my child, of this problem? The other recurring question that parents ask is, can we prevent the birth of another child with this disorder? So this is the real life issue that crops up every day in a genetics lab, such as over there. Now, public attention to these disorders, because they are individually rare but collectively numerous, public attention is increasing. Most recently, because some of you will have seen it, a Karnataka High Court judgment involving parents of 44 children who had filed a writ petition, public interest litigation, seeking relief from the government for 44 of their children. And in a remarkable judgment, the Karnataka government said, yes, ordered the government of Karnataka to pay for the treatment of these children. This was widely covered in the media, both in the English media and in vernacular press. why I am saying this is the cost of treatment of each one of these disorders is very, very high, anywhere from 40 lakhs to 80 lakhs to 1 crore per year. Now, which parent can possibly afford such costs? So that's where startups, uh, are very, very important, because you have to think of innovative ways, innovative substitutes for treating such disorders. Because giving a diagnosis is really not a great help. Of course, you can publish a paper and become known and all that for having discovered a this particular gene or variant, but that's about it. Now, I will be specific and mention possible startup opportunities for some of the young people here. One is the whole area of medical foods for PKU, that is phenylketonuria, which is a common recessive disorder found in our populations, and 15 other acute genetic metabolic disorders. Now, an Indian parent faces a lot of problem with a PKU child, faces a lot of problems. We recently had a father from Rajasthan came all the way from his small town to Bangalore to see us at CHG, because we had announced on our website that we are holding a one-day meeting on treating such disorders. It was really a scientific meeting with some involvement of patients and their parents. Now, the cost of a 400-gram tin of this medical food, which is really food out of which you have removed this amino acid phenylalanine, it costs 15 to 16,000 rupees. And don't forget, this child has to be on it lifelong, or almost lifelong. So, and this one tin may cost about a week or 15 days, depending upon the child and the body weight and so on and so forth. And that's not all. There are various difficulties in importing this food. There is, the import permits are given only for a 6-month, they're valid for a 6-month period. In other words, the father has to go to, this particular father said how we have to go to the airport, wait for the customs clearance and all the rest. It's a horrendous problem. In other words, at the policies level also we have to simplify many, many things. But the more important issue that startups would have to take interest in is, why can't it be made here? It is not rocket science. It's a very simple food that can be made here. We don't have to import it from all the way from the United States or wherever. So, there are, in addition to PKU, there are 14 other genetic metabolic disorders which are available, for which foods are available in the West but not here. There's a tricky policy issue here, and that is, if a food is classified, if such a supplement, nutritional supplement, you might say, is classified as a food, if it comes under FSSAI, the kind that the label you see approval in many of these shops, food shops. But if it's called medicine to treat a disease, then it comes under DGCI and leads to all sorts of problems. So I appeal to Mr. Gaurav Gupta and in particular, and Kiran, because he plays in so many national roles, that these are irritants, difficulties that we can address as educated people, well-informed people. But how does a small man from Rajasthan, how does he deal with these problems on a day-to-day basis? This is the problem. Now, there is again another drug for rare disease called tetrahydrobiopterin. This is used to treat an alternate form of PKU, which is due to a missense mutation. Again, of course, this requires gene sequencing and so on. But once you have this gene sequence, you have to treat the disease. Now, this particular form of PK use current is maybe more common in India than in the West, as per our own data from CHG and from other centers. And there are also a group of treatments mediated by immunosugars rather. These are pentavalent sugars, and these are used in substrate reduction therapies. At, at the moment, they are not made in India. And as Dr. Vijay Chandru mentioned, the whole clotting factor, factor 9, factor 8, to treat bleeding disorders such as hemophilia. Government of India is doing a lot in this area. It imports in bulk these clotting factors and distributes it. But suddenly there's a supply problem, and when you started a person on child on these clotting factors, you can't interrupt, because irreversible damage occurs if you interrupt the treatment. So here again, with all the technology available, with all the resources available, with all the skills available, we should be making these things in India. Now, the Karnataka High Court judgment I referred to had to deal with a group of disorders called lysosomal storage disorders. And one of them is Gaucher's. And at the moment, there's a lot of interest in developing biosimilars for this particular enzyme that's missing in these patients. There again, while a startup may not be entered this competitive area, which is really high end, nevertheless, some of you may have the wherewithal to try out this area as well. Now, there's a common misconception that the market for treatment, drugs, for medicines of this to treat rare diseases is small, and therefore is not a profitable. Is not profitable for the startup to enter this space. But I disagree. In USA, enzyme replacement therapy for Gaucher's is being given for about approximately 5,000 patients, is what my colleague Meenakshi Bhatt tells me. And the income generated by the company, one single company, is $1 billion per year. Out of this one drug alone. So I think it's wrong to assume that it's not profitable to invest in rare disease therapies. Now, any medicine that treats a rare disease, whether it's an enzyme, a protein, or a component of a protein, or whatever, they all need to be looked at by these startups, because you're in a very, very unique environment within India, certainly, being in South Bangalore. I say this because in the north of the city, as Vijay Chandru pointed out, there's a concentration of high science, high technology institutions. Whereas in the south, we are more towards the health sector. We have St. John's, we have Indira Gandhi Institute of Child Health, we have NIMHANS, we also have the Rajiv Gandhi Health University's headquarters located here. And of course, we have this beautiful biotech park here housing these three institutions. Now, there is this drug policy that has been talked about for the last couple of years, the so-called orphan drug policy. It's very, very important, I want to emphasize to Principal Secretary here, to get this policy going fairly soon, because in 1983, the US enacted its orphan drug policy. Until then, you saw an occasional drug making it to the market because of Food and Drug Administration stringent requirements. But after the orphan drug policy was put into effect in the US, as many as 400 products are now available in the US market today, but not here, of course. Now, I want to mention what are potential weaknesses. I'm like Kiran, I'm very optimistic. I'm an optimistic person by nature, and I am very excited about the future of Karnataka, Bangalore in particular, and of course India in this biotech sector. But I also once in a while ask myself, why is it that every other week I see something coming out of Stanford or Boston that's so novel, that's so interdisciplinary? I think there are some weaknesses in our system which cannot be addressed overnight but has to be looked at by policymakers in the long run. I refer to the fact that three of India's top ranked institutions, top 10, in science and technology, academic institutions, that in Bangalore. I don't have to name them. One of them is over 100 years old. The other one is more recent, maybe a quarter century old. But none of them has a hospital on its premises. In other words, you can exist as grow as a distinguished institution without any contact with patients or real life issues of patient care. That's the reality today. How many IITs are there in the country today? Probably about 18. How many ICERs have been started in the last 15 years? Maybe about 15. None of them has a hospital on its premises. Yeah, I will do that, yes. So there's no reason why we stick to genomics, look at the sequence, very impersonal, but the real problems lie with the individual there, who is at the end of the DNA, who is the patient. And unless we come in direct contact with the patient, I think progress will be very difficult. But I don't want to sound pessimistic. India has had its own trajectory, both in science and medicine. Some things are very laudable, but the larger issue of bringing together both medicine and science on the same campus, that I think is very, very important. And the older people among us must think about this. Thank you very much.
I thank Professor Sharat Chandra for those comments. I'm sure CHG would be happy to meet any startups who are interested in pursuing the lines he suggested. We are very pleased that Professor G. Padmanabhan could make it. He has just come from another meeting at NIMHANS. I request him to speak on startups prospects in biotechnology. A brief sort of operational announcement. There are various mentors waiting to meet mentees and vice versa. Just hang on for 10 minutes.